Hello everyone, welcome to the session. Am I audible? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Okay. So in the last session for week 5, we may have covered promise, right? So what exactly is promise, and what is a promise, right? So in today's session, we will continue with that, and we will jump onto a very important topic that you would require for creating your project and everything, that is fetch. Okay, so this basically is an API or a function that is directly provided by JavaScript, which you can use in your script directly. Okay, so you can simply call that method and use it. Okay, you don't have to import any libraries or install anything from outside. You can directly use it. Very similar to a DOM manipulation. So you use document dot write. So that document is another API which you can directly use. Very similar to that, we have fetch. Okay, now what exactly is fetch? And why do we use it? So that will be covered in today's session, and we will be doing that in two things. One is I will be I will be kind of showing a document to you which I've curated, so that you have everything in one place, whatever is required in terms of learning fetch. And also we will be coding a bit so that you understand how to exactly use it in the code. Okay, so we'll be making a small view application. Okay, and we'll be using fetch within the view application. Okay, so first I'll start off with sharing my screen. Give me a minute. Okay, I hope my screen is visible. So yeah, so this is the document that I've prepared for the fetch, right? So this completely tells you, as a beginner, if you are learning fetch for the very first time, what exactly is fetch, how do we use it, and what are the use cases wherever we'll need fetch, what are the use cases, and how does the structure of fetch request changes with respect to the thing that we're trying to do. Okay, so first we need to understand what exactly is fetch. So what is fetch? Fetch is a API which is a modern way to make HTTP requests in JavaScript. Now, why are we calling it modern way? Because there were other things also before this, something called as HTTP XML request or XML HTTP request, which used to allow you to make requests to the server. Now, basically, what is happening here? We will have a front end application created on any framework like Vue, or even it can be core JavaScript also, right? And on the other hand, we'll be having backend, which again can be created with any framework like Flask. In our syllabus, we are using Flask, right? So it can be created with Flask, or in fact, we can do it with the help of Django also, and also Node also, right? So there can be multiple frameworks used to create backend. Now, what is common in this? We create APIs, right? So we create APIs that when fetched gives you some information related to whatever URL was fetched, right? So for example, if I go to a URL, there is some information that is returned as a response in the form of JSON. All right, now that JSON is then converted into an HTML or a view that can be shown on the screen to the client. All right, now this information of, or this retrieval of information from the backend to front end is done with the help of fetch. All right, so in simple terms, it allows you to make HTTP requests to the server. All right, so every time we will be making a request to a URL, and in return we will be expecting some response from it. All right, so why do we need fetch exactly? We will need fetch to communicate with server, right? Now, how do we communicate? Generally, we make or we access a URL with a certain method, and if at all there is a requirement of some data, we will provide that data along with that request, right? So we request the server, and in return we expect a response. So this process of requesting the server is done with the help of fetch in case you are having a front end. All right, and obviously we also call it without reloading the entire web page, because this fetch is basically used to make asynchronous request, right? That is the reason we are adding a fetch right after promise, because fetch is probably the best example of handling promise. All right, so if you know, or if you have slight understanding of how asynchronous programming works, you will be in a better position to understand fetch. If you still have some confusions, don't worry, we'll try to cover it in today's session. All right, so basically, what are most web applications that we create? So far we have created in Mad1, or so far we have created in Mad2. What are these applications doing? They were getting some data, right? I mentioned user data here, but it can be any data. So it is used to fetch some data, get some data from the server. It is used to submit forms, right? Send data in, or send credentials in the form of form to the backend. Then display the dynamic content, all right? Things like blogs or whatever, right? And then there are things like external services, which are already there, not created with backend, but already there, which we can directly use. All right. And these are the basic, in any web application, you will generally see these are the things happening. All right. Now, when these things happen, there will be a way in which the request changes. All right. And based on that, we have created some scenarios for which you will be using fetch. All right. So mostly it will be based on these four scenarios. Your application development project, for Mat2, and in fact, for any project that you create, any simple project, CRUD based project that you create, it will be based on these four scenarios. Okay, so what are these scenario? This is the first is to be able to make a simple request, or make a request to a static URL. Okay, then fetch a dynamic URL, meaning you will be able to request a dynamic URL. What is this dynamic URL? We'll come to that in some time. Then we will fetch an URL, or we will fetch a request a URL with the help of fetch. And at the same point, we will also provide some information in the form of request header. All right. So that is one scenario. And the final scenario is same thing. Again, we'll make a request to an endpoint or an URL. But at this point, we will be sending data in the form of request body. Okay. So third scenario tells you sending data or information in the form of request header. And the fourth scenario is sending data in the form of request body. All right. So these are the four major scenarios that you will be coming across when you are working with application. All right. So we'll see this scenarios one by one in the form of application, and then we'll understand the details of what this fetches. All right. Now, in general, how do you make a fetch request? I've written the syntax here, but we'll be actually seeing that in a real in an application. Right. So what exactly is that? It is just like a method, which is like a function. What do you do it? You just call it using the name fetch. Then you provide the URL, and then you provide some options which are required. All right. Now, based on the type of request we are making, these options may or may not change. All right. Or it may or may not happen. So that is the reason it is called as options, right? It may or may not be there, but URL has to be there, because obviously when you're fetching something, you has to mention from where you are fetching. So the address of the location has to be provided, which is the URL. All right. Now, what is this dot catch? We will come to that when we will understand what exactly fetch returns. All right. So with this, I will be moving across this page and the VS Code, and obviously this will be shared to you. So I'll be moving across pages, but as of now, I will move on to my VS Code. All right. Is the VS Code visible?
Yes.
Okay. Till this point, any doubt?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. So with that, I'll proceed. And what we are going to do is, so then this particular page, or this particular folder already has some documents, or has some files. And one of that is the PDF that I'm going to share with you, the same PDF that I'm referring here. All right, this thing. So this is one document. And the second document that you see here is the resource there, resource.txt. So resource.txt has a list of all the APIs, or not the APIs actually, yeah, you can call them APIs, you can call them URLs that I'm going to use with fetch. All right. So with respect to every scenario that we have discussed, where there will be a request made to a fetch, made with fetch to these URLs, and I'll be using them as and when required. Now you can see, if I just zoom in, you can see there is one thing that is coming in the three of the URLs. This is JSON placeholder. Okay, now what is this? JSON placeholder is a dummy API created so that we can test our front end, right? So for example, if I have created a front end, and if I want to test it, how is the data coming up? Where is the data getting placed? Right? I cannot always have a backend running. I cannot always create dummy data on my own. So what the developers have done is they have created a site called JSON placeholder, and they have created some dummy users. All right. So I'll just give you an example from here. All right, so let's say if I go to the browser and I simply make a request to this JSON placeholder, you will see a list of JSON. So this is basically, it returns a JSON. So therefore, it is an API which returns JSON. What is it returning? It is returning array of objects. Every object represent a user. All right, so it returns dummy user. It is not stored somewhere or something. It simply returns dummy user. Now how does this help me? This help me to test my front end, or plan my front end, or in fact develop my front end without having the need to have a working backend, right? So to actually test your front end, you will first need a backend. So you first create a backend and then retrieve data from there. Okay, let's not do that. We will directly go to JSON API. All right, and then we will retrieve data. So this is just a dummy data which we will be using for our work. All right, now there are multiple other things. If you just go to right, instead of simply users, if you just go to JSON placeholder, so it will give you some other APIs also. For example, it will give you resources on post. What happens when you go to HTTPS JSON placeholder, this URL /post, it will return you 100 dummy post. All right, /comments, it will return you 500 dummy comments, right? So all these things kind of help you to plan your front end without having the need to run the backend. All right, so they kind of give you dummy thing. So if you see here, what are we going to use today? We are going to use users. So there are this users. Okay, so if you saw what happened when I click on this endpoint /users, it gave me a list of 10 dummy users, right? So that is what it says here. It will give you, when you go to /users, it will give you 10 dummy users. If you go to to dos, it will give you 200 dummy to dos. There are also more endpoints defined. For example, if I go to get post, very similar to this, I will get 100 posts, but let's say if I do /post/1, I will get that particular post with ID 1. All right. So we'll be using these two. So you can see here also, I've used /post. And so very similar to that, there is this user data also. Somewhere it was here, but okay, I have this. So this we'll be using. All right. So basically, where is this coming from? This is coming from a dummy API that is created for our testing. The final thing is the mock HTTP status IO. We will come to this later. I'll explain what this is, what we are using this for later. All right. Once we should understand the other use cases. All right. Okay. So now here, since we are going to create a view application, I will create two files. One is the index.html, where my view application will load. And second thing, the script.js, where my view application will be written. All right. So let's create the index.html. Index.html, and then we also have script.js. Script.js. All right. Now in the index.html, I'll create that boilerplate. Okay, and then simply name the title as view fetch. All right, because this is what we are trying to understand. Then here we will add the CDN for view. All right, and at the bottom we will attach the script. All right, so how do we attach that? Script src, and in the src will provide the address of that script, which is script.js. All right, and obviously we want a place where the view application gets loaded. I will create a div element with id app. All right, so div element is created and the id of that is app. Okay, so this is where my view application will load. I'm sure this is completely clear to you all. Now I will go to the web page and then figure out or get the view to CDN link. Okay, so you can copy this development version and paste it here. All right, so that is the initial setup of our index.html. All right, now we'll go to script.js. In the script.js, we'll create a view application. So it will be created like this: const app equals to new view. Okay, and then there is this options object, and then here I will be mounting this with a dollar mount method. All right, so dollar mount, and here we'll be providing that hash app. All right, so this is how my view application will be mounted to the index.html div element. All right. Okay, I hope this much is clear. Now I'll create a data element. So since this is a view application with a lot of options object, a lot of options provided to us, the first important option that we are going to create is the first important property that we are going to use is the data property. All right, which will have all sort of data that we are going to store. Secondly, we are going to use this methods. Okay, methods, and we'll be providing multiple methods that are going to be there in the application that we're going to use. All right, and then there is something called as view lifecycle hooks. All right, one of the hooks that we will always use is mounted. All right, so this is going to be the hook that I'm going to use now. If some of you do not know what this does, it will be clear in a minute. All right, so this is the basic structure of my view application. This is the basic structure of my index.html, and then I'll be adding the data here. All right, so the business logic of my application, the front end part of it, the fetch and everything, the data fetch and everything will happen here. All right, are we clear till this point?
Yes.
Any doubt? Okay. All right, so the first method is corresponding to the first scenario. Okay, so let us go to that place. All right, what is the first scenario? The first scenario is fetch on a simple static URL. All right, so fetch on a simple static URL. And I have also added the code blocks here so that you can directly copy and put it in your wherever you are practicing this. All right, so let us try with this. Okay, I will definitely be adding the other things also, but I just want to show you what fetch returns. All right, and I will simply be creating some random method names. Let's say this is named as, let's say, method 1. Okay, method 1. This is going to be a function. Okay, and within a function, generally a fetch or whatever you do, you create a functions, you can create methods that is in the application. So these methods can either be used to rerun by themselves whenever the component gets loaded, or are triggered by external events, right? So what do I mean by that? So let's say something should happen with a button, so you click a button and then you attach a method to it. All right, very similar to that. And one thing is mounted, that we'll see in a minute. Okay, yeah. Did somebody put something on text or raise hand? Right. No, PDF is not shared already. We'll be doing later. Okay. Okay, so this method 1 is basically the place where I'll be making a first fetch request. Okay, so let's see what we get when we just create a fetch request, right? So I'll create a variable called response. Okay, and then I will put on that put in that endpoint. Okay, so if you see the syntax, where was that document? Yeah, so if you see the syntax, what is the syntax? You write fetch and then you provide the URL. Okay, and this options is actually options. It is an optional, so you may or may not require it, and you will require it based on the type of request you're doing, right? In case of simple static URL, you don't need options as such. All right. Okay, so let's say if I just do this, and whatever will be fetched will come as a response, right? So let me just console this, log this, right? So console.log response. All right, now I want this method to run whenever I write this whenever I run this application. This method should automatically run. See, this is a method. It should be attached to an event. Unless that event happens, this will not be triggered, right? So what is the event that I'm trying to talk about here? The moment the component gets loaded, this method should run. Okay, so if I now change my statement to the moment the component is mounted, this particular method should run. Okay, this means if I simply fetch this or kind of access this method here in my mounted hook, what is going to happen? The moment this component is going to get loaded, whatever comes here will start triggering. So let's say if I write this method 1 here. Now, how do I access method 1 or any other property for that matter? Using this, right? So this dot method 1, and I simply call it like this. What is going to happen? As soon as my this view component gets mounted on div, all right, this function is going to get run, meaning the mounted hook gets executed by its own, and whatever is there within the mounted hook will get executed, meaning whatever is there. So let's say if I write console.log and simply write mounted is executed like this. All right, so first that will run and then the method will run. Okay, so let's keep it like this. So if I just save it, and how do we run this application? Simply we'll go to index.html and do a live server. Okay, so if you just do a go live, it will run. If you do not have a live server, if you don't see a go live here, you can just do a right click and you will see this open with live server here, right? So that is also fine. Some opens here. Okay, I'll try to open it in my the same URL. I'll try to open in my this thing only, Chrome browser. No difference, just for the sake of showing. All right, now nothing is shown here because the index.html has nothing to be shown exactly. Now what is the place where we look at? We look at the console. All right, so you see that there is something shown on the console, right? Can we zoom it? Yeah. What is shown on the console? Mounted is executed. Okay, this means as soon as the component got loaded, everything within the mounted hook will get triggered automatically. All right, that part will run automatically. So the first thing is mounted is executed, and the second thing is that the the method one function that we ran got executed. What exactly that method one function returned? It returned a promise. All right, something that you saw in the last session. Okay, so if a promise is returned, how do you execute, or how do you resolve a promise? There is something called as a .then method. All right, so we'll use that .then method to execute the promise. All right, where is that? In the script.js. Now, when you do a fetch, you don't need to store that response somewhere because we know that is going to be a promise. So you don't need to store it. I just stored it in response variable because I just wanted to demonstrate what it returns, right? But you don't need to store it anywhere. You can directly do a fetch, all right? And since I know that a fetch method returns a promise, I can directly use fetch.then. Okay, and what we are going to write in .then, whatever is returned by that fetch is caught as a function of is caught as an argument of the arrow function that we are going to use within this .then block. All right, so let's say if I write response equals to not equals to response, so whatever is returned by this fetch will be caught here as a argument, and then you write the definition of that function. All right, what to do with that argument? What I'll do for now, I'll just simply log it again, console.log. Okay, and what we're going to log? The response. All right, so what is going to happen here? The fetch returns something that promise is resolved with the help of then. Okay, then whatever is actual data that is returned by the fetch will come under response. Okay, now let us see what that actual data is. All right, so what is this actual data? It actual data is again a promise, right? So you see response. Okay, you see a response, but then you cannot directly access everything. All right, this response needs to be converted into JSON to be able to access. All right, so that you can access it easily. You're returning a response, but this response cannot be accessed directly. You need to convert this response into a JSON. All right, so what do I do? Instead of simply logging it, I'll convert it into a JSON. Okay, response.json. Okay, response.json. All right, and then I'll try to log this, what we get with response.json. Okay, initially we simply logged response. Now we are logging response.json. Let's see what do we get. All right, now when you try to convert it in the response.json, it again returns a promise. Okay, whenever you something that was written by the fetch, you caught that in response res this variable, then you logged it. It was looking like a JSON, right? To be able to access it, you actually try to convert it into an actual JSON, meaning actual JSON, and then you try to fetch the value. But now when I try to convert it into JSON, what happens? It actually returns another promise. Okay, why is that? Because whenever a response is retrieved from the server, converting into JSON is again a time-taking task, right? The whole point of using asynchronous function is to put time-taking tasks into a different thread, right? So whenever you try to convert that response into an actual JSON, which can be used in your code, you use this method called response.json. Now, when you do this, it actually returns another promise. All right. So if this entire thing is returning another promise, how do I resolve it? I use another dot then. Okay, and simply we are not logging now. We are just retrieving that response.json. Now we are just returning that response.json. We are not logging it. Logging was done just to show you that what it returns. Right now, I know that this response.json, whenever it was returned, was a promise. And if I now use dot then, I know that there will be something retrieved as data. Okay, something will be retrieved as data. All right, and that data now will be the actual converted JSON which I can use. All right, for the sake of showing, I will simply log it now. Console.log data. All right, so what is happening? First fetch request returned a promise which was called by this variable called res. Okay, whatever it returned was resolved and called by this res. All right, then it was converted to the JSON. Okay, whatever this returned was again a promise. All right, when I resolved it into again a dot, then it was stored in data, and now what I'm doing with that data, I am just simply logging it. Okay, let's see what happens. All right, now I have a JSON which is actually accessible. So you see, initially also it was returning some information, but now it is returning the actual information. All right, now this JSON that you are seeing is very similar to what I showed at the beginning, right? So when we directly fetch this particular endpoint. All right, so the same information is actually fetched here and is shown on the console. Okay, same tab it is here. All right, so what is basically happening here, just to understand fetch, where's our code? Yeah, in the script.js, to understand fetch, what did we do? We just made a fetch request first to see what it returns. It was returning a promise. All right, to resolve that promise, we returned a dot then. Okay, and then we tried to log that response. Okay, initially it was okay, it was returning a response, and we kind of saw that it is going to be a JSON response, and obviously most of the APIs are going to return a JSON response. All right, so whenever you try to use this method called response.json to convert the returned information into JSON, it will in fact return another promise. All right, if there is another promise, you'll have to again resolve it. Okay, and whenever you resolve it, you get the actual JSON response in the form of data here, which you can use in the function anywhere. All right, here I have simply used to log data. Later on, I'll be using it for some other functions also. I mean, obviously, I want this data to put in here. All right, so I'll be using it there. All right, finally, okay, now these things will happen, or these two things will run when the fetch method is resolved, meaning it is completely or successfully working, and it is returning some response to you, right? But what if there is an error? What if there is an error? For that, to handle error, we'll simply use catch method. All right, we'll simply use catch method and we'll name it as error. Okay, I mean, we'll catch that error in this variable called err, and we'll use it anyhow we want, right? So what are we going to do here? We simply write console.log. All right, and I'll just use some string manipulation here, something like this, error here, and then finally log that error like this. All right, so at this point, since this is working fine, I'll not be able to log it here. Okay, we will see this later, but we know that most of the fetch functions return JSON, and you have to actually manage it by using two thens. All right, now let us see the syntax of actual fetch. Okay, so if I go to this page, this page, you'll see that, okay, there are two things. One is the fetch with URL and options. So for this particular request, we did not need that options. Okay, the first thing was first the response, which was returned, which was like JSON. We need to convert it into JSON. So we did that, which in turn returned a JSON, which we again converted into data and logged it. All right, so that is what is happening here. So whatever I wrote here is this. Okay, in the script method one, whatever I wrote is actually this. All right, I just wanted to explain this. Now you need to understand, whenever you make a fetch request, you will mostly be using two then and one catch. All right, this is just and why is that? Because in the first then you are converting into response.json. Okay, it is not the response that is promised, it is this method. Whenever you use this method to actually use the JSON data, you convert it into JSON with this method called .json, and the consequence of using this method is it returns another promise, and that another promise has to be resolved using another .then. Okay, are we clear till this point? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay, any doubt? Okay, so you have to try it on your own to understand the doubts and everything. We'll clear that later. Okay, so with this example, I explained you not only how the fetch works, but also how to make a request to a simple static URL, right? Simple static URL, meaning there is nothing there in the URL. It is simple set of string that you just put in, and then you return the response. Okay, the overall structure of every request that we are going to make is going to be this only. The overall structure is going to be this only. What changes is whether we need options or not, whether the URL is dynamic or not. Okay, those are the two things, and based on that, the structure of my function will change. All right, that is the only thing that we need to understand. Now, if I go back to my, yeah, go ahead. What error we get usually? We'll come to the error part. So there is a complete section dedicated to error. I'll come to that and it will be more clear. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. Line number 14, assume that if some error happens, it will log it error colon and then the actual error. If some error happens. Now, when the error happens, what are these error will be? We will come to that in the last part of this session. All right. First, we need to understand how this exactly fetch works and what are the different scenarios. Okay, so are we clear with the first scenario? Fetch on a simple static URL. Okay, you put in the URL here, you use two thens. First then is same code for every fetch request, response.json, and then finally you do something with data. Here we are simply logging it. In the application, we are going to use that data and do a bit manipulation. And then finally we catch it using the error. Okay, is this clear? Anybody? Is this clear?
Yes.
Okay, now what we'll do is, since this is, I just wanted to, this is just a demonstration. I just wanted to tell you how to use the data that it is using in the actual application, right? So this document, while this document tells you, okay, what should be the code and everything, this application will tell you how to use that code within a Vue application. All right. Now, what is that I'm going to do is, whatever data is retrieved, instead of simply logging it onto the console, I will be storing that data into my actual data block. All right. Now, this data, when I'm not very sure about what the data is, I can simply write data as a generic term. But I know that this HTTP, this URL is going to return a list of users, right? It is going to return a list of or the array of users. This means I can use this variable also here, users. Okay, and these are please note that the functions that you write here are simply functions, right? You can name anything, you can name any thing to their arguments. For example, here I've used res, but in the document that I will be sharing, there is a response return, right? So this is up to you. This is argument name which you can use anything you want. All right. For in with the same idea, what I've done is, since I know that the data that I'm going to get is going to be list of users, I've simply written users. Now, what do I do with this users? What do I do with this users? Firstly, here in my data block, I'll be creating a users variable. Okay. And initially initially I'll just put it as empty string. Okay, because there is no users in the application. Okay, as of now, this component does not have users. There is no pre-defined data or initial state of the data. Initial state, no users. Okay, actual users come from this API, right? So you need to fill these users with this response of this API. How do you do that? So first you will access the users of the data property. How do you access that? This dot users. All right, this dot users. This particular thing refers to this data property users. All right, and then what do you want this to become? You want this to become users, the same users coming here. Okay, any confusion in the structure of this function? Okay, if you want to, if this particular thing is not clear, let me just rewrite it into more recognizable function. All right, so what I'll do is, we'll be creating, so basically this is going to be arrow function. You don't name them anywhere. So this is going to be something like this. So you first take this variable users, okay, and then you use an arrow function. Then you write the definition of the arrow function, and in the definition of the arrow function, what is going to happen? I'll write this dot users, that is the users from my application should take this value users, okay, and then semicolon. Okay, I hope this structure is clear to you. This is a simple structure of an arrow function. So what you're doing, the users which is fed to this function through arguments is available within the function everywhere. Okay, what you're doing with that value, you are accessing the data property of the application and assigning these users to them. So initially the data property which was empty string or empty array will now be replaced with the array of users that we retrieved as response, because that response is coming here. Okay, is this structure clear to you? Okay, if this structure is clear, the other thing is exactly same, because since we did not have multiple arguments, only one argument users, we just use without parenthesis. And since there was only one statement, we did not use curly braces also. All right, just like this, one argument, one statement. So arrow function can be written like this also. This is just a shorthand of arrow function. All right, extended arrow function, like a definition will be something like this. All right, now what is going to happen? Let's say if I now just save this, what is going to happen? Let's see. All right, so you see that mount is executed is happening, but you don't see that list of array now. Why is that? Because now we are not logging it, but we are storing it to the users somewhere. Okay, meaning whatever response was fetched is now stored here. Okay, in the application you'll always see the initial state, but when this response is fetched, you will see the value of users coming something. All right, now you need to use this users value in your template. Okay, the application actually. So what are you going to do with this? How do you write the template of the application? You will write an HTML. All right, now the entire view application is loaded here, so all the data properties, methods, everything will have access or will be eligible or working within this div. All right, so I can directly access that users property. All right, so I'll just write some code here, some HTML here, wherein I'll be creating a table. All right, so let's do that. Okay, I'll write h2. Okay, and here I'll write user table. User table. All right, now I'm going to create a table. Okay, a table. Then within the table there is going to be t head. Okay, and within table there is also going to be t body. Okay, within t head there is going to be one row. Okay, which in turn has some headings, right? So those are represented by th. Okay, th. Okay, now what are these headings going to be? Let us see. Oh, I don't have it here, but I have it here, right? So what are these headings going to be? Let's say I'll put the name, okay, username, email, and phone. Okay, we'll also put the phone and website. Address and company will leave to something else. All right. So let's say if I want to put in, I want to retrieve that data, and from that data, I want to display the name, username, email, phone, and website. How do we do that? I'll go to my index.html. How many fields are there? 5, I think. Name, username, phone, email, website. Okay, 5. All right. So name, username, email. These are just headers, right? So you can name them with whatever, or you can put anything you want, any text you want, and what it can be uppercase, lowercase, does not matter. These are just headings. Website. Okay, am I missing anything? Okay, I'm missing the phone. All right, phone should come up because I'm just following the order that is there in the JSON. All right, so we'll not have this as of now. Okay, so these are going to be headers of the table. Now finally we'll talk of the body. All right, so we'll talk of the body. Within the body there is going to be tr again. All right, and within the tr there is going to be th. Sorry, not th, td. Now this is now the data thing. All right, now the thing is, we want this entire row to iterate how many times? As many number of users there are, right? So in the users array, this particular returns 10 users for now. Okay, so if I want to list those 10 users one by one, I want that I want the tr to repeat 10 times. This means the repetition of tr will depend on how many elements are there or how many objects are there in my array users, right? Users array. So I'll simply iterate on user array. How do I iterate on user array? I'll write v for equals to, and here directly you can write user in users. All right, why is that? Because this users is directly defined to me. All right, and since it is defined data property of my app, it is available in my html everywhere meaning within this div. All right, since the user in user is available, every user would represent a single user object. What do I mean by that? Every user will represent this particular object. All right, now if I want to get to the name, username, etc. of that user, how will I write it here? I write user dot name. All right, something like this. But I don't want the user dot name, this particular text, to come here. I want the value of user dot name to come here. All right, so what do? I put this in double curly braces. Okay, very similar to Jinja. All right, but in Vue also we use double curly braces. Okay. All right, now there will be multiple properties like this. So what are the properties we're going to have? Name, username, phone, email, website. 5 times, right? So name, username, phone, email, and website. Okay, email and website. Now the thing is, I want this table, this complete table, to be printed only if there are users. Okay, for example, for some reason, as of now it's not happening, but let's say for some reason this returned an error. Okay, so I don't want anything to come here. I don't want this entire table to come here. This means I can write a condition to in the table also. Okay, and I want this table only if the users has some values. How do I write that? I write v if users, simply. All right, so what does that mean? If users has some value, it will be printed. Okay, if there is v, if there can be a v else also, right? So I can simply write an h2 here which says users not found. Okay, users not found, but this thing should be displayed or should be rendered only if the users are not there. Okay, so either I want the table or I want this text, right? So here I can simply write v else. All right, I don't need to provide anything, no condition, anything. Simply providing vls will work. All right, so what is happening here? We have created a table, okay, which says user table. All right, and this table will be printed only if there is some value in the users. All right, once the value is there in the users, we will iterate through the users array. All right, through this is going to be the same, which is going to come only once, but this is something that is going to get repeated. All right, now within this, the body also does not get repeated. It is the row that gets repeated. So I'm put the condition in rows. All right, so how many number of users are there, those many times it is going to iterate and give me data. All right, let us see this. You fetch. All right, you see something here? Can we zoom this? Okay, so we don't need console for now, but we need this, right? So the user table will now show some data. Okay, where is this data coming from? This data is actually coming from the fetch. All right, so it is fetching and storing that data in the script.js. This is fetching. This particular fetch is actually fetching the data from there and storing that data to users. All right, to make sure that my application is making or changing with respect to the data that is fetched, I need to actually create those many variables in data. If it is not a data property, it will not be recognized, right? So if I want to list the users, I need to create users as data properties. All right, okay, are we clear with this? So here we have data, and once the data is fetched, the data is put here. Okay, for some reason, let's say if this does not work and the data is not put, okay, what is going to happen? All right. Sorry, give me a minute. Okay, we have this data. So let's say for some reason this data is not there. Okay, can we, let me just comment this only. Okay, that the hook itself is not running. All right, this means this empty list will not work. Okay, let us initiate it with an empty string. Okay, empty string will be a falsy value. Okay, now you see that the users data is not there, meaning now it will show users not found, right? But now let's say if you uncomment this, meaning this function will run the moment the component loads, what is going to happen? That empty data or the empty string will be replaced by the actual array, and then you can see it here. All right, so now we have taken care of both the condition that whether the data is there, what should happen, not there, what should happen. Okay, are we clear with this? So this kind of tells you how you can fetch the data from the resource and use that data to display on the screen. All right, with this code. Okay, any doubt till this point? Any doubt? Something happening in the chat? Okay, all right, so I hope everything is clear till this point. All right, now we'll come to the second point. All right, what is the second point? We are trying to get the dynamic data. All right, the dynamic data. All right, so let us go to that part and see. All right, so what is this? So if I, let's say, have this list of users now, if I have this list of users now in my page, this is the list of users. Now I want to, let's say, have some button here anywhere, let's say here. If I click on that button, I should be able to get a specific view of the particular user only, whichever button I click. Okay, so what is going to happen? This user will be specific, all right, and I'm retrieving data for that specific user, not all the users. All right. This means I need to provide ID of the user dynamically. All right. That is what is shown in this part. All right. So assuming that if you want to show or want to fetch data specifically for a particular user, you have this dynamic data. All right. If you go to this part, you have this dynamic data. All right. This is the URL. You have dynamic data. So how do you provide dynamic data using this backticks? All right. So what I'll be doing now, I'll be creating another method. Let's say method 2, which is going to be another function. Okay, this is going to be another function. And here I will write everything same. I'll make some changes. Okay, or rather I'll copy from there, right? There is a written code. Okay, all right. Fetch did not copy. Oh, this fetch entirely should be copied now. Let me just handle the indentations. Okay, so what is happening here? I am dynamically providing the user ID. All right, the actual endpoint is like this. All right, this thing, second one. Okay, so the entire endpoint remains same. Or the only thing that is dynamic is you also have to provide user ID, and this can be anything. It can be either 1, 2, 200, 500, anything based on number of users that are there. All right, based on that, it will fetch information of a particular user. All right, so what is happening here? In the script, what is happening now, this second method is actually fetching the information based on the user ID. All right, and this user ID is actually coming from outside the function. All right, then once that information is retrieved, we know that it is going to be promise, so it is resolved using promise.then first then. And in the first then, we are converting into the response into a JSON. So response.json is in turn going to return a promise, so dot then again. All right, and finally we do something with this data. Okay, so I know that login everything now you understand, so I'll not be logging it. Okay, I'll do something else with this data. Okay, so the first thing that you need to understand is since this user ID is coming from outside, this entire thing is a part of function, and this user ID is fed into the function. This user ID has to be created as argument of the function. Okay, it should be created as argument. This means that this method 2 is a function that takes an argument. Okay, so later on when you call it, how do you call it? Something like this. Method 2, this is just a sample, right? I'm just showing you method 2, and then you provide the ID 1, 2, 3, whatever it is. Okay, this 3 gets inside the code and is put here. Okay, and then you fetch. All right, so what is happening here? Whenever there is a dynamic data returned into a function, or wherever there is a URL that takes some dynamic data, that dynamic data has to be provided to the function somehow. Okay, we don't have any other place to retrieve that data, therefore we are just providing as an argument. All right, later on when we run this function, we will provide that user ID here, which will be placed here. Then the fetch method will run and return the data. All right, now okay, let us just see what it returns when you simply write /users, let's say /3. Okay, what it returns information of that particular user. Okay, and please note that this is not an array now, this is just an object, because we are retrieving a single or information of a single user, so it returns an object. This means you need to store this information somewhere, and if you simply store it in users, it will be a confusing thing, right? Initially you are loading the list of users, now you are replacing the list of user with single user. That is not what we want. So what I'll do is I'll create another variable called user, simple user, and then again initiate it with empty string. Okay, first the list of user and initiate it with the empty string. Okay, and then here now I'll replace this data with a user. Okay, any variable I can use, and then place the value or whatever response I'm retrieving, whatever information I'm retrieving, which in this case I know that it is going to be an object. This object has to be assigned to that user data property that we have created in view. So how do we do that? We'll write this dot user equals to user. All right, this dot user equals to user. All right, and we can test this. We can test this later. Okay, just let me show you. Okay, now how do I test this? I can simply just go in my HTML, simply go into my HTML, and here I can simply write user. Okay, I can simply write user. All right, now there is a problem. Everything is fine. Can you tell me what is the problem with this code here?
That user ID, which one is selected?
User ID, which one is selected? No, I can simply run it, right? Not an issue. That is fine. What is the issue? Will this work completely fine? Okay, will this run or not? Let us see. Nothing is happening, right? This means that function is not running. Something is happening.
You're not calling the method to, no sir.
Exactly. Right. So we're not calling it. We have written, okay, you do something, you retrieve the information from this endpoint, put it to user. But everything of this will happen only when you call this method too. Right. So what I'm going to do, I will call it. Okay. And since I want this to be executed automatically when I load the component, I'm just putting it into mounted. Later on, we'll change this position. Okay, but let's say we will have to call it. So it is going to be method 2, and since this method requires an argument, we have to provide argument. Okay, in our case this is going to be 3. Okay, now let's see. Okay, now you see that the entire information is getting loaded, and since this is this particular method returns an object, you will be seeing an object here. Okay, this entire thing is an object. Let me just close this. Yeah, this is an object. Too much zoom. Okay, fine. Okay, now I know. I just want to initially what is happening, or currently what is happening. This entire object is getting loaded automatically, right? And rightly so, because we have put it into mounted hook. We have put it into mounted hook. What I want is I want a detail button here, some button here, which when I click should give me the information. All right. So that has to be changed in the HTML. All right. So what I'll do here, I will add one header, one extra header, which instead of website says action. Okay, very similar to in Madon also we did this so many times. All right, but here, okay, instead I will be creating one more row, which instead of demonstrating, or which instead of printing anything from the user object, will have a button. All right, and for that we'll have to create a button here. Okay, and what is this button going to show? See details. Okay, I can simply write see details. All right, and whenever I click on this button, I'll have to add a click event. Whenever I click on this button, it should then trigger this method 2. Okay, method 2. Okay, now the problem is, let's say if I just put 3 here and save this, let's see what happens. Okay, and obviously I will since this method is put here, I will not remove it from I'll go ahead, and I don't need it here in the mounted. I don't want it to automatically get triggered, right? I want it only to get triggered when the button is clicked. Okay, so now it will not come, but let's say when I click on see details, then it will come. Okay, initially it was not coming, but when I click on see details, it will come. Okay, but the problem, what is the problem here? Can somebody tell me the problem? Okay, let's see if I click on the fifth row, and see the information. Okay, what is there a problem you see?
It is showing the user ID 3 always.
3 only, right? So wherever, it does not matter, wherever you click, it will show only 3. Okay, so there is no dynamicity, right? The problem is here. This is fine. Why is this fine? Because you are triggering it with 3, so it is fine. But we need to make it dynamic so that whenever you trigger, it does not get triggered with 3, but it should be triggered with the ID of the user. All right. So instead of simply writing 3 here, I'll write user.id. Okay. Instead of simply writing 3 here, I'll write user.id. So whatever for that particular row, there will be a different ID. Okay. Now, can we see this? Let me see. Element div table body tr td. Okay, so that event is not shown here, otherwise I would have shown. Okay, but we can demonstrate it here. So for example, now if I click on fifth button, I will see information on Chelsea, right? Let's say if I click on last button, I will see information on that particular user. All right, so now this button is dynamic. Okay, let us add some more functionality to this button. Okay, so that is fine. Now instead of simply showing, what I've done here is simply put the object as it is, right? We can just make some better UI. We can just improve this UI. Okay, how do I improve this UI? We can just make sure that it is working or written in a better format. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll just create a div here. Okay, within this div, we will write first h2. Okay, first h2, and then I'll write details for, and now you will, here I will be mentioning the information, right? So here we, instead of simply writing user, I write user dot name. Sorry, what is this? User dot name. All right, we'll start off with this. Secondly, we will write address. Okay, so you note when I, this place, right? So we were putting in the name, username, email, phone, and website, but we did not put any information on address and company. So that these are the things we'll access here, because it's like see more details, right? So we'll see these details when we give only when you go to more details. Okay, so the first thing is, let's create an h3. Okay, and this will have address. Okay, now what are the things that are there in address? What are the things do we have in address? We have street, suite, city, and zip code. Let's not put the latitude and longitude. All right, so we'll put the other things. Okay, let's start off with uh, smallest thing is suite, then street, then city, and then zip code. Okay, suite. All right, then we have, okay, I'll need four h4s, right? So just copy it here like this. Then the other thing is street. Then the other thing is city, and the final thing is zip code. Zip code. All right, this is one thing. Now here I'll be putting in the values. Okay, now let us to actually put the values. What values would come here? Definitely these are going to be in the double curly braces, no doubt in that. Okay, these are all things going to be in the double curly braces, no doubt in that. But how are we going to access these values? Okay, simply writing user dot street will not work. Why? Because this street is basically another object within the address property. All right, so in order to access these properties, how will you write user dot address dot street, right, and so on. So in case of suite, I'll write user dot address dot suite. All right, and similarly for other things also, I'll be using the same pattern. Okay, so this is going to be street, this is going to be city, okay, and this is going to be zip code. Okay, so you need to understand the structure of JSON to actually load the data. The second thing that we have is the company. All right, so we'll write very similar, on the similar note, we'll write for the company also. So let's say we'll write h3, write company, and again in the form of h4s, we will write the company name. And what is the other thing that we need? Yeah, so there is this name, and obviously we'll write this catchphrase. All right, so how do you access the company? Very similar to how you accessed address, right? So it is going to be user dot company dot name. Okay, and then there is this catchphrase they have. It's going to be, now phrase is generally written smaller than the user the name of the company. Let's have use h5, right? So it is going to be user dot company dot catchphrase. Okay, let me check the name. Okay, so this catchphrase. Okay, company spelling mistake. All right, so this is what we are going to have. Now, along with this, let's say the information comes on the page. Along with this, I also need a close button. Okay, so if I click on close, the information will go. All right, so how do I do that? How do I do that? After this, I'll just create a button. Okay, after this, I'll create a button, and this button will close. Okay, will simply close. Okay, let's see how this goes. Okay, some issue. Is there an issue? Let's see. Okay, if nothing is printing, this means there is some issue. We'll see that. How do we see that? We'll go to the console and see. Okay, so many issues here. The properties of undefined reading suite. Properties of undefined. So suite is not defined somewhere. Okay, now let me tell you what is the issue. The issue is, okay, so this suite, okay, you have it here, right? So this suite will come when there is this user dot or user dot suite or user dot address dot suite is there, right? But the problem with user dot name is, let us see the script. Initially, when the method is not run, the user is initiated with an empty string. If the user is initiated with an empty string, there is no point of writing or accessing the attributes of user. All right. So initially, when the user is not loaded, we'll have to write a condition to print something else. Right. How do we do that? We'll go to our index.html. Okay. We'll go to our index.html, and here we will write v if equals to user. This means this entire div will be rendered only when there is some value attached with user. Otherwise, it will not render. And that is fair enough, right? If you don't have anything in the user, what is the point of writing user.name and everything, right? Let us try this. Okay, now this means there is no error. This means it is working fine. Okay, now let's say if I click on fourth C detail. Okay, now that information is coming here. Okay, that information is coming here. All right, and now let us go to this close button. Okay, so currently nothing is happening with this close button. Why is that? Because we have simply written this button as close, but we have not attached any method to it. All right, if you have not attached any method to it, what we are going to do, we'll attach a method. Go to script, method 3, which is going to be function. All right, and what this method should do, it should close. Okay, it should close, meaning, let's say, and how does it close? Let's say if I go back and reset the value of user to an empty string, that if condition will come into picture. Okay, what do I mean by that? Let's say if this close button resets the value of user to an empty string, this condition will again come into picture because it will react to the change in user. Okay, and again, if this v-if says null, meaning if this v-if fails, okay, then this complete thing will go, right? So the only thing that I need to do in this final method to remove that page that is coming on the bottom is simply change the value of user back to an empty string, or in this case, maybe we'll start off or we'll initiate with null. Okay, we'll initiate it with null and then finally set it to null again. Okay, finally set it to null again. Okay, let's see. And obviously this method has to be attached. So I'll go to index.html, and here we'll do click event, which will take method 3. All right, let us see. Okay, now let's see. So if I, let's say, click on the third one, you'll see the information of the third user, and then if I click on close, it goes. Why? Because it resets the value of user, and resetting it to null will remove this entire block. Okay, so that's how you can bring something on the screen and remove it if you want. Okay, so it is just a game of statuses. What is the status of user or the variable that actually, brings it. So let's say if I click on the last fourth, it takes the information on last fourth and you close it. All right, are we clear till this point? Okay, so now we know how to make a fetch request to dynamic data, and with the help of that data, bring some information on the screen. All right, are we clear till this point? Any doubt? Please raise your hands.
Sir, can you summarize method 2 and method 3?
Summarize method 2 and method 3. Okay, so method 2, what it is doing? Okay, what is method 2 doing? Method 2 is basically, okay, it is just a trigger, right? So it is a function that runs on an event. Okay, what is the event? Our event is a click event, right? So if you go on the front end, what happens? This click should actually run my method 2. All right, now this is not simply running the method 2, it should run method 2 with a value. Okay, that is the reason whenever when I wrote my index.html, in the index.html, whenever I attach this method 2, this method 2 is actually attached with a user ID. So what is going to happen? Whenever a click event happens, this method 2 is going to get triggered with this value. And what is this value, or where is this value coming from? This value is coming from the loop, right? So there are 10 different users having 10 different IDs. So this method 2 will be like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, right? Whichever see details button you click, that method will only trigger. Meaning if I click on the third see detail button, it will trigger with user.id 3. Okay, now what happens when this method 2 with user.id 3 gets triggered? It will go back to my script. Sorry, it will go back to my script with value 3 here. Okay, either you write like this or you write like this. Completely remove this. Both are fine. Okay, so now when you look at this method 2 and the argument together, it makes more sense. But for the sake of writing it for the clarity, this is better, right? So this is what is called as anonymous functions, which is named as, or which are actually written when you want to write value of a return it as a value of an attribute. Okay, what is my attribute? Method 2. So basically, I'm trying to create a function whose name is method 2, and it takes an argument called user ID. What is going to happen within this function? Whenever this function is triggered, you will be making a fetch request with the dynamic part written like this, right? So if you want to make a part of string dynamic, use backticks along with dollar curly braces. All right, so this user ID is put here. This means if I click on third, what is going to happen? This 3 is going to come here, which is in turn going to get fed here. So you are actually making a request to https this JSON placeholder .typecode.com/user/3. All right, which will in turn give you the response object. What is the response object? We are going to get this. Okay, at the end of the day, what I need to do, I need to pass on this response object to an existing data property. That is what I've done here. If there is error, that is going to get cached. Okay, that is going to get caught. All right, now initially when this value is set null, why am I setting initial value? Because my index.html responds to, or my view application reacts to change in data properties. Initially when it is set to null, this if condition is false, it will not completely render this, right? But the moment this user is actually having a value, his user is loaded with the actual value. What is the value getting loaded to the user? This. When it has an actual value, then we are going to get into this div and render it. All right, and we are simply access various values of it. Then finally we want to close this. Okay, the information that we are showing on the page, we need to also close this. So what we did, we created a close button and attached a method to it. All right, and simply closing does not require any argument. All right, what is happening in closing? If I go back to my rendered page, what is happening in closing? The div that got loaded gets vanished. All right, now how to remove the div will be or the idea behind that is based on how the div comes on the page at the first place, right? How does the div come on the first place? Whenever there is a user object. If the user object does not have anything or it has null, it will go back. This means just to simply remove that div object from the screen, I just need to reset its value. Script.js. I just need to reset the value of user to null. That's all. So when I reset this value of user to null, the condition fails, which is written here. This condition again fails. This means this complete block will be removed from the DOM. All right. So that is how these two methods are working. Method 2 is actually fetching the data and putting it somewhere. Okay. The idea of method 3 is to simply load this user object. Okay, how that user object is coming on the DOM is decided by this index.html. All right, and method 2 is simply changing the value of user to null because again, why is that? Because this complete rendering of this div element depends on the value of user. If it is there, it will be loaded. If it is not there, it will be removed. And that is what we are trying to do. Removing is actually removing this. Okay, so that is what is happening in method 2 and method 3. Okay, is this clear?
Yes.
Hello, sir.
Go ahead.
This is the same thing when we run the Flask app in backend and generate JSONify files, and then we can fetch using view.
Yes.
And display.
So correct. So what is happening here? So at this point we do not have that Flask backend We do
Yes,
do
sir.
not have that API, right? So
Yes,
instead
sir.
of creating those API, what I did, I am fetching already existing APIs, dummy APIs, because my
Yes, sir.
focus is to explain you what to do next, right? Now you have APIs, what to do with those APIs. That is the focus of the lecture. How
Okay,
to
sir.
create APIs is a different thing, right? That we already have done.
Thank you, sir.
Right now, okay, so the final, now the next thing is coming to the third and fourth scenario. So we'll be seeing the third and fourth scenario together. Let me go to that page. Yeah, so what is the third scenario? When the data is sent as request header, okay, and the fourth scenario is when the data is sent through request body. All right, now generally, what is the use case? The use case is whenever you want to send data, or whenever you see that, okay, you want to send data in the form of request header, generally that request header is like, let's say, token or the content type, okay, or the course, okay, all these things are generally headers. All these things are sent in the form of header. Authorization a token is sent in the form of header. Content type is stored or sent in the form of header. Okay, what is exactly stored in the form of body? Credentials, information of element. Okay, for example, if you're writing a blog application, right, or creating a new post, so information of that post will be sent as request body. It will not be sent as request header. All right, so what is the use case of sending information in request headers? Tokens, okay, content type. What is the use case of sending information as request body? Actually creating some element in the database. Okay, so here if you see, if you focus on this, we are actually creating a post into the database. Okay, assuming that there is a blog app which helps you to create post. Okay, there is an endpoint defined to it. How do you create a post? Meaning, how do you send that information from your client to the server using request body? All right, so this is the third and fourth scenario that we are going to see. All right, I have created two different test cases here. Test cases meaning two different scenarios here. But what did I say? It's the token that you generally send. You send the content type. All right. So instead of token, I'll be demonstrating with the content type. So you see that there's content type also. Okay. So with this single example, I'll be able to explain both the things, right? Information sent with request header, information sent with request body. Okay. Let's do that. So for that, what I'll do is I'll simply copy this content first. Okay. And then I'll explain. So we'll create a fourth method. Method 4 equals to function. Okay, method 4 equals to function, and then we'll write the definition here. Okay, I'll explain this definitely. Third headers body, so everything comes here, and then we have the three thens. This comes here and this comes here. Okay, now the structure looks fine, familiar. All right, now the I'm using the third resource that I mentioned, this. Right, what is this resource giving me? This is going to give me some n number of posts, I think. Yeah, so when you go to post, yeah, so it gives you 100 posts. Okay, if you want to retrieve posts, just go ahead and write /post. It will give you 100 random posts. All right, but that is not what we are doing. We are going to add information or add a post here. Okay, so for that we'll have to focus on this. Okay, so you see, when you use post with get method, you will get 100 posts. Okay, but what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to send data to back to the server, right? So I'll be using same endpoint, but I'll be using post method. Okay, so this is what we are trying to use. Same endpoint, but with post method. Okay, and now that you have to mention, okay, with what method also I'm trying to put, what are the headers and everything, we will now make use of this. This options. Okay, remember this options. So URL is anywhere must, okay, because URL you have to provide. It is a mandatory field that you have to provide. Options is optional, okay, as the name suggests, and so far we have not used options. Okay, but in this case, the third and fourth scenario where we have to mention the headers, we have to mention the body and everything, and also we need to mention what method we have to make the request with. It is important to mention options. Okay, and it is nothing but it is going to be another JSON or another object that we create and put. All right, let us see. So in the script, what we are doing is we are making a fetch request to /post. This from here to here is an actual option. Okay, what are these options? Let me just remove it from there and put it somewhere different so that you can separately see. Okay, so this is going to be another JSON. This is going to be another JSON which has 3 attributes as of now. First attribute is method. With what method you have to make the request. Okay. The second attribute is headers, right? So let's say if you want to provide information as request headers, this is how you provide. All right. In case of token, how will you provide? Something like this. So you'll write authorization. Okay, authorization. Not like this. Authorization. And here within the string, you will provide bearer space token. Okay, so the actual token will come here. Therefore, I'll put this in curly braces or angle brackets. Okay, so this will be replaced by your actual encrypted token that stores the user information. All right, so this is the options object. At this point, we need method, we need headers, and finally we need the body. Okay, and why do we need body? This represents the information that is going as request header, and this represents the information that is going as request body. All right, now in case of request header, you don't need to do anything, but in case of request body, whatever body you have, okay, obviously it is going to be JSON body, so this post data is also going to be a JSON body, but this body has to be stringified first and then sent. Okay, so what is the idea behind this? The request body actually needs to be sent as JSON string, not the actual JSON. All right, that is the reason we have this method called JSON.stringify. All right, and this entire object has to be provided as an option along with the URL. All right, the next 3 things are going to be exactly same. All right, then you get response.json, then data. Here we are simply logging it, but we'll replace it with something useful. So I'll remove this part. All right. Okay. So I'll comment this part also. I'll just keep it so that you have the information separately. All right. But this is the object that you send along with the fetch. All right. Now object is required. It is a required quantity when you want to make a post request, when you want to provide some information in the header, and when you want to also provide request body. All right, so request body is provided like this. So if this JSON is an API, you don't have to import anything, and nothing has to be installed, directly can be used. All right, just JSON.stringify, and then you put the post data. Now what is this post data? All right, this will be changed when it comes to view application. All right, so I will just make this here as post data. Post data. So post data is going to be another JSON. Okay, and that JSON I'll take from again the code here. Not the token. Yeah, this one. Okay, what is this? This is going to be another JSON. JSON meaning it is going to be another object. Okay, so you provide title, body. Now this is a defined structure. Okay, this will be given by the API itself. The API documentation will itself tell you that, okay, this is going to be the structure of request body. If you want to provide like this, otherwise there will be an issue. All right, so this is internally provided by the API itself. So for example, when I try to document, the engineers of this API will document. If you're sending a post request, if you're sending a JSON body, the body that you're going to provide has to be like this. So it has to be an object which will have these attributes called title, body, and user ID. All right, title, body, and user ID. Everything, we cannot change anything from that. Okay, so that documentation will be provided. All right, now how do I provide this JSON body here? Not exactly here. How do I provide this post data? Initially it was simply written post data, but when it comes to a view application, this information is coming from view, right? So how do I provide it? This dot post data. Okay, this dot post data. So that this dot post data will come here, will get converted into a stringified JSON, and then will be sent as request body. Okay, and this here initially it is simply getting logged. Let's see what it logs exactly. So let's simply write data equals to not equals to data, and then write an arrow function and simply log this data. Console.log data. Okay, if there is an error, it will throw the error. All right, now we have created method 4. Is there an issue with method 4? Why is it in a different color? Okay, let's see. If there is any issue, we'll come to know. Okay, so we have created a method 4. Now what we need to do is we need to trigger this method 4. Okay, we need to trigger this method 4. So generally you will have a form, right? So when you provide this information, this post data and everything, this information will be filled by the user, which will then be fed again, right? But in this case, we do not have form, so we will not be doing that. Rather, just to trigger this, what we'll do, we'll put it in mounted. Okay, so this dot method 4, what it will do, the moment this component gets loaded, it will make a post request to this post, okay, with this method, with this header, and with this body. It will make a post request. Let's see what do we get. Okay, so it says, okay, so mounted is executed, meaning this, the moment this component got loaded, the mounted hook got executed, and this is what we are getting. So basically it returns the same object that we sent. Okay, it simply returns the same object that we sent, except there is one additional thing, which is the ID 101. All right, so this ID is basically ID of the post, and user ID is mentioned there, right? So this is the ID of the post. Why 101? Because in general we have 100 posts, right? So if you go to this JSON placeholder, when you do /get post, you will be getting 100 posts, right? And when you do when you now add a new post, the ID should be 101. Can we get this like this? Let's say /posts ID 1, user ID 1. Do we have that at the last? Let's see. ID 10, ID 1, 100. No. Okay, so you need to understand that this JSON is a dummy, right? So it is not having a backend. It is not storing whatever we send. It will just simply give you, this information is a dummy. Everything that we are receiving is a dummy information, right? So if you go here, this information is also dummy. ID 101 kind of tells you, or kind of mimics the idea of a new object or a new post getting added into the post table. It mimics that. It is exactly not doing that. That is the reason when I tried to do this post, I did not get the information, right? I did not get the 101th option. I'm still getting the 100 post only. So what it does is it kind of tells you, or it kind of gives you that, okay, I'm giving a response, and it is kind of mimicking what actual response you would have, but this is not an actual response. This post that I've created is not actually getting stored somewhere, right? But it is giving a mimic. It is giving you an idea or a feeling that, okay, new post is added. Where? Here. Okay, so the data that we logged simply here kind of gives you the same information that you put in, along with an additional information, which is the post ID. All right, this ID 101 is the post ID. Okay, so are we clear with how do you make a fetch request to an endpoint that takes information in the form of a request body, also request header also? And generally you will see whenever there is a request body, I mean in Mad1 also you saw method with post, right? When you submit a form, you submit with post method. Why? Because there is an information from the form going from front end to back end. Here also same thing is happening. This information from the front end is going to the back end, so you need to use post method. Okay, because this post method will be responsible for adding new information at the back end. Okay, are we clear at this point?
Sir, one doubt, sir. Then what will be there in that response?
Anything. I mean, see, the response will be whatever the endpoint returns, right? It will be whatever the endpoint returns.
I
Okay,
submit
in our
a
case,
form and got it, sir.
yeah.
It's like
Okay,
you're
so
submitting a form.
Yeah, it's like submitting a form. Okay, in our case, this endpoint is returning the same object that we post in, but along with an external ID, right? So for example, if you define a backend that returns user or post added successfully, this data will be showing you that, okay, post added successfully. Okay, so it depends on what the backend returns.
Okay, got it, sir. Thank you, sir. And that stringify is to convert it in the JSON format.
JSON string. There is something called as JSON string. What do I mean by JSON string? For example, if I have some JSON like this, okay, user : others. All right, this is a simple JSON. What is a JSON string? It is something like this. This is a JSON string. So it looks like a JSON, but it is actually a string, and at the backend it is actually parsed into an actual JSON. Okay, so if something at the backend is getting parsed into an actual JSON, we need to make sure that it is parsable. This means we have to make sure that it is JSON string only that is going. Did you get this?
Okay. And this is only because we are using it within the view, isn't it?
Not really, for any front end. Your data is going as a request body, right? So whenever your data goes as a request body, the body has to be sent as JSON string. So irrespective whether it is Vue or React or anything else, any front end framework, the information should go as response this stringified version only. All right.
Okay. Okay. Got it, sir.
Why is that? Because let's say when you define a Python backend, something like this, data, something my data. Okay, I'm writing everything in the single. Okay, took some random name. Let's say I create a Python backend. Okay, my data. All right. How do you retrieve this information? How do you retrieve this information? Something like this: request equals to or data equals to
Request
request
dot, yeah,
request.json.
JSON.
Okay,
Okay.
for some reason it is writing random things. Okay, request.json, right? Request.json. What does that mean? The body that has come to in the request.json, here internally parsing of JSON string happens.
Oh, okay. So that is why you have to send it as a string. Okay.
Yeah. So if you are parsing a JSON string, you have to make sure that only JSON string is passed. JSON string is provided from the front end. Okay. Because you are converting into JSON. If you are converting into JSON, what can be converted into JSON? Something that can be converted into JSON, right? A JSON string can be converted into JSON. Can a JSON be converted into JSON? No. Therefore, you will send it as JSON.stringify.
Okay.
Okay, so I will also keep this. Here I'll mention JSON or simply normal JSON. Here I'll mention JSON string,
String.
normal JSON. Here this is JSON string. Okay, why is that? Because at the end of the day, when you look at it, it is a JSON string, but there is this method called JSON.parse which can convert this JSON string into actual JSON. Okay, therefore you need to stringify, where the request body has to be stringified.
Thank you, sir.
Sir,
Okay,
if,
I hope
if
this is
there
clear.
is sir, if there is numeric data, what happens? In stringify, a number will become a string, and then how would it
That's
parse?
fine. That's fine. So even not even a number, even if there is an array, because JSON can also have an array internally, it can have another object internally, does not matter. If it is JSON serializable, it will be converted, right? So for example, when you have a number, something like this, 5, this will be converted into 5. Okay. When you have an array, it will be something like this. Okay. This will be converted into an actual array. Okay. When you have an object, it will be like this. This will be converted into an actual actual object. Okay. For example, when you have, let's say, null. Okay, when you have null in Python backend, it will be converted to null. Okay, let's say you have true. In Python backend, it will be converted to true. Okay, so depends on what backend is there, the JSON will convert it accordingly.
Okay, thanks very much.
It has
sir.
to be
So,
JSON serializable.
So that tells me that if actually my front end is accepting, let's say, alphanumeric, and I actually have number 5 as alphanumeric, then I have to do some backspace and all that because I want to preserve, 5 as a string, because a field that accepts
you don't
both.
need to see unless see if it is 5, it will be converted to 5. But let's say if it is A5, JavaScript will typecast into that 5 into string. All right, and then it will return you A5 string only.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so if there is an alphanumeric, we know that, okay, if you try to concatenate a string with a number, the number get typecasted into string, right? So that is going to happen.
Got it, sir. Thank you.
Because I'll keep this also like this. Okay, so we now have covered the 4 scenarios. What are the 4 scenarios we have? Okay, what are the 4 scenarios we had? Get the no, not this thing, right? Fetch on simple static URL, fetch on dynamic URL. Now there can be combinations, right? I can fetch on a dynamic URL and still have request body. I can fetch on a dynamic URL and still have a request header. So I hope you understand now. Okay, so these are the 4 major cases that you would use fetch for. Okay, and all those things are covered in the form of these 4 methods. Okay, are we clear till this point?
Hello, sir. I have a doubt.
Yeah.
Why are we using double den after fetch?
Why are we using
This then
double
dot then
then?
twice.
Double then. Why are we using double then? See, first what happens is the fetch. Okay, I'll show you. Okay, what fetch returns? What fetch returns is a promise. Okay, it returns a promise. Okay, so if it returns a promise, you will use first then to resolve this promise. All right, what do you get? In return, you get a response. Okay, and that response is JSON like. All right, you cannot directly access that response. That response is JSON like. All right, so what you do in the first then, what do? You convert or you use this method called response.json. Okay, but what this response.json does is it returns another promise. If this returns another promise, how do you resolve it? You use one more then, right? So use another then. Okay, now once this response.json returns another promise and you resolve this using then, you will get actual JSON. Okay, now since this actual JSON can be renamed anything, you are generally naming it as data, users, my user, anything. All right. So finally, to get the actual data, which can be accessed within the front end, you have to convert it into accessible JSON. All right. And to convert a response into an accessible JSON, you are obliged to use, you're obligated to use double promise, because the second response.json, see, initially when I was getting JSON like, it is JSON like, it's not JSON, it cannot be accessed directly. I cannot simply store it somewhere and use it, right? To be able to store it and use it, I need to convert this response like JSON into an actual JSON. But what is happening here on this conversion, what is happening? This response.json method itself returns a promise. Okay, when it itself returns a promise, you don't have any choice but again use it then to resolve it. Finally, when you use it then to resolve it, you will then get the actual data which can be accessible data. That is the reason after every fetch, you will generally see two thens. Did you get this?
Yes, sir. Got it.
Okay, so I'll keep this here also. This also here so that you can read it. Okay, that's why for every then we are using, for every fetch we are using two thens. Script. Okay, now that we are done with the 4 scenarios, we need to understand, or we are missing out on one thing, right? That is this. For every endpoint we have written .catch, but when exactly will this error come? When exactly will this error come, right? To understand that, we have one more resource called this. This is another dummy API, but this does something different. Instead of giving fake responses, it gives fake response codes. All right, it generates error for 404. It generates error like 500. It generates error for 400. Okay, it gives you 200 status. Okay, if the error is 200, if the response is 200. So this endpoint generates a dummy status code. All right, and for that we will try to understand why exactly are we doing this. Okay, so for that we'll create method 5 function. Okay, now I'll obviously copy from the resource. Finally we have, okay, this thing. Okay, so why are we doing this? Because we need to understand when does a fetch request fail, right? We need to understand when will this .catch come into picture. Okay, when will this .catch come into picture? Okay, we'll need to understand that, and for that we need to, if we are trying to understand it something, we need to see what are the problems associated with it. Okay, so what are the problems? Let's see. Okay, so first I'll make this. Okay, and then copy this. What should I copy? This part? No, this is already used. This will copy. Okay, let's see what is there. Okay, I'm just copying the syntax, leave it as is, but I'll be in this place. Instead of that, I'll be using the endpoint that we have, right? Resource. This I'll be using. All right. Although this can be looked at as a dynamic thing, but this is not exactly dynamic. I'll be sticking to one, right? So for example, if I put 200 here, let's see what do we get. Okay. Fetch method 5. We are doing then, and basically we need to understand what this particularly this fetch returns, or this site returns in general. So you'll see that there is not two thens, there is only one then. Okay. Let's see what it returns. Okay, and obviously when I need to run this, so instead of using method 4 now, I will use method 5. Okay, method 5. And then when we go ahead, we will return, we'll see this. Okay, so there is syntax error, non-white space. Okay. Simply log, will log this response, console.log. Console.log response. Okay, let's see. All right. So when I did a console.log, I'm getting a response. Okay, I'm getting a response. And since this is not returning an actual response, obviously we are getting a response like thing, but we are not getting an actual response because the idea of this endpoint is to return status code simply. It is not returning an actual response. Everything else was returning response, right? This was returning posts. This was returning users with a particular user ID. This was returning a list of users. So there was an actual body with the response. This engine does not return a body, right? So there is no body. It is just something called as readable string. Okay, it is simply returning me some headers. Okay, which is like okay, redirected, status. What is important for us is to understand what is the status 200. Okay, and since this is directly returning only headers and there is no body, there is no point of using response.json. All right. If there is no response directly, there is no point of using response.json. We are only worried about printing what the response is. We will not use response.json. If there is no response.json, there is no requirement of another then. All right. Did you get this? This is specific for you. I mean, for this endpoint. Use endpoint to endpoint, things change. Generally, when you make a fetch request to an endpoint, you are expecting some response, right? Response body. This URL or this particular mocking API just kind of tells you or gives you a mocking of a status code. So do we really need a body for that? No. If we don't need a body for that, we are done with this only, right? We are okay with the response or the JSON-like response that we are getting. If we are okay with JSON-like response, we don't need to convert that response into a JSON using response.json. If you are not using response.json, there is no point, there is no promise, there is no another promise that is coming, therefore only one then. Okay, so you need to understand that this API itself behaves differently. Okay, that is first thing. Secondly, when I write, say, let's say write 200 code, it gives me a 200 code. All right, 200 code. All right. Now I'll log one thing. Instead of logging it simply like this, I'll write my response. Okay, my response, and okay, obviously this has to be a string. My response. Okay, and then I'll write a response. Okay, just to tell you that, okay, whenever I retrieve a response, it will be retrieved like this. Is there any issue with brackets? Like this. Okay, one extra bracket was required. Okay, there is one more issue. Why is that? Oh, this X for some reason. Okay, now let's say if I go ahead, now I'll get my response. Okay, this is just to tell you that we are getting into a then block. Okay, why are we getting into a then block? Okay, somebody can say, okay, because the response is retrieved, status code is 200 and everything, right? Now let us change this 200 to 404, meaning not found, right? We are returning or mimicking a response or a status code of not found. Okay, if this is a not found, then will it go here or will it get into catch?
So it will go to catch.
Sorry?
It will go to catch.
It will go to catch. Okay, let's see. Okay, how many of you think that it will go to catch? How many of you think it will go to then? Is there anybody who thinks it will go to then? Okay, so what are we expecting? A response, something like this network error, and then everything related to 404, right? What are we getting? We are getting that response, we are getting 404, but there is this my response return here instead of network error. This means my information is still going to then. What is the issue?
So this API is designed to return for something. So the promise is always resolved. It is never rejected. So it always goes to them.
Okay. Yeah, see, that is there, but the main point to understand here is what the error that I'm getting. So you got 500, right? This is again an error. Okay. Now this is an error with respect to, we need to understand this error is coming with respect to what? What exactly is the error? Okay. Or who will call it as an error? A developer running this application or a user running this application will tell you, okay, some error happened. Okay. Internal server error, not found error. It is an HTTP error. Okay. Whatever we are getting here is an HTTP error. HTTP error are always resolved. Okay, so some of you have mentioned, right? It is the nature of fetch that it is always resolving. Why is that? Because the fetch will always try to give you a positive response, meaning it will always try to resolve your request. It will always try to resolve your request. And HTTP error, any error apart from, let's say, 404, 500, 400, all these things are HTTP error, not programming error. Okay, if these are not programming error, if there is no issue happening with this, then why will catch come, right? It will always be caught by then block. HTTP errors are actually a valid responses, right? If you're getting a 404, you're getting a valid response. If you're getting a 500, you're getting a valid response, meaning clients understand what is happening with the website. All right, did you get this? But let's say if there is fundamentally wrong with something, for example, if I remove this, if I completely change the domain also, let's see what happens. You see this? Network error. So what is happening here? The network error, if there is a fundamentally wrong with the endpoint, then it will not come in the then block. It will then come in the catch block. Okay. So you need to understand that HTTP errors are valid error in terms of fetch. Therefore, they will be caught. Okay. And why is that? Because let's say, obviously you have seen in the applications that, for example, if it shows 404, instead of simply dropping the entire application, instead of simply crashing the entire application, they give you some other relevant information, right? And it varies application to application, right? Why is that? Because you can change your response when it comes to then, but you cannot change when it comes to catch. It is an error. Error will be shown as error only. Okay, but if you want to modify your response, you need to catch it as a valid response and then make modifications. Are we in this conversation?
Yes, I got it, sir. So basically, HTTP requests, the HTTP errors are taken as a valid resolved promises.
Exactly. So HTTP errors, errors that we have, for example, anything other than 200, okay, 200 and 299, what is happening? They are errors. Okay, something is wrong with the server, but the client is getting a valid response, right? Therefore, they have to be caught with then. They are not errors of the complete domain itself. This is not that you are going to a wrong domain entirely, or there is a course error. Okay, cross origin request something, right? Cross origin request status, something like that it is. Okay, so all these errors are actually problematic. Network error is a problematic. For example, if my net goes down, I obviously cannot demonstrate when my net goes down, but let's say if you're trying to get to an endpoint and the network itself is not connected, okay, you cannot expect 404 or 500. You will always expect an error. Okay, and that error is common. Therefore, it will be caught by fetch in the catch block. Okay, so if example your net is down, it will be in the catch block. If you are writing the wrong domain itself, your error will come in the fetch block. Okay, if you are trying to fetch an API that is protected by CORS, you will get error in the catch block in the fetch. But if it is an HTTP error, if it is a valid HTTP error, 404, 500, 400, 403, okay, 401, unauthorized, all these errors are valid in terms of fetch. May not be valid for the application, but valid in terms of fetch. So they will always come in the then block. Okay, so you need to understand what is an error for a fetch, what is an error for an application. Okay, so the status code that we work on are actually errors of the application. not errors of the fetch. Okay. Therefore, in order to, therefore we have this catch block. This catch block will always take care of if the network is down, all right, or if you're trying to go to a protected API. All right. For example, if one of the APIs take network authorization, something like this, you did not provide authorization and you're trying to fetch the API. What should happen? It should go to catch block. Okay. All right. So you are trying to go into course error if the network is down or if the fundamental domain name itself is wrong. Right. So here I've changed the domain name. What was the domain name originally? IO. Right. Now, if I, let's say, go ahead and make a fetch request. Where is it? Yeah, so now it is coming again in the then block. So although this 500 is wrong, 500 is an error, but it is an error with respect to application. With respect to fetch, it is a valid HTTP status code. Hence, it is caught by then, not catch block. Okay, is this clear?
So authentication errors are caught in catch or then.
Authentication errors, for example, if the authentication is wrong, right, 401 and all those things, they will be caught by then because they are valid again. 401, 403 are valid. Okay, but let's say if you go, if you try to get an go to a protected API, but you completely miss out on course, right? Then it will be a problem, right? Cross origin is different. Authentication is different. Cross origin meaning you are trying to get an API from a front end which is not accepting information from this front end. Right? Did you get this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Authentication is a proper valid status code 401, 403, unauthorized. All those things are valid status codes. This means they will be caught by then. Okay. Course error, network error, invalid domain error, all these things will be caught by catch block. Okay. I've documented this. Don't worry. Here, right? So what is not considered as an error? Meaning what is not considered as an error by fetch? 404 not found, 403 forbidden, 500 internal server error. All these things will be caught by then block. Okay. And what are actually considered as error? Network failure, invalid domain, request timeout. This is one thing that I've not mentioned. Course violation. All these things are considered as error. So they will be all come in the catch block. So it is written here, right? And also have summarized. So what is the scenario and where it will be taken. So fetch rejects the promise automatically, meaning it is fundamental error, right? Handled meaning it is actually coming in the then block. Then you'll have to decide what is going to happen, right? So I will just show you how do you handle then. If everything is coming in then, 404 is coming to then, 200 is coming to then, 403 is coming to then, how do you handle? Okay, that is what we are going to see very quickly. Okay, so what I'll do here is instead of simply removing, simply logging this response, I will write some cases. All right, and how do I write that cases? Using if block. Okay, now if you see a response, I'm not sure if that gets reloaded somewhere. Yeah, so this response is already there. If you see this response, you will see this one of the attributes is this OK. Okay, it is one of the attributes of the response. Okay, response.ok, and this will be true only for 200. Okay, if the status code is 200, this will be true. For everything else, it will be false. Okay. For example, if I write response.ok, then write console.log data fetched successfully. All right. Else there will be some issue. So I will write console.log, or in fact there is console.error also. Okay, console.error. Then here we'll write error and write mention the status code. So what is going to be status code? We'll mention like this. So it will be response.status. Okay, like this. All right, so what we are doing within the then block, you're handling every error on the individual basis. This is what is called as error handling in the front end. Okay, let's see. So for the 500, let's see what do we get. We get error 500. All right, because we are throwing that error, console.error. All right, but let's say if I change this URL to 200, what do we get? Data fetch successfully. So now you are handling both the things are coming to then, but you are handling them accordingly. All right. So for the HTTP errors, you have to mention everything in the then block and handle everything. right? And catch block is generally created in terms of application. Catch block is generally created to make sure the domain name is correctly put and the network is connected. All right, all those things. All right, so that's how you create a fetch with proper network, with proper error handling and other things, right? So you need to understand what is an error. You cannot simply write this complete statement here. You cannot write it here in the catch block because 500 internal server will never be caught. 404 not found will never be caught. 400 bad requests will never be caught, right? Therefore, to make sure what exactly gets in the catch block, when should you mention catch block at all? Should you mention it or not? When should you write if and else should be clear when you know what kind of error I'm receiving, whether it is an error with respect to fetch, whether it is an error with respect to application. Okay. Okay, so this is how you do. This is how you understand error. Everything I've mentioned in this document from end to end. So we started off from understanding fetch. All right. Why do we need fetch? Then scenarios, code blocks of the scenarios. All right. And then what is error in fetch? Okay. So this is what I wanted to explain today. Any doubt in this one? Okay. Have you understood some part of it? Yeah. Most of the things you'll be, let's say when you practice, when you do it on your own, you'll be more clear, definitely. But have you understood what exactly is fetch doing? At the end of the day, it is making or it is helping you to make a request to backend. Okay. Any doubt? Anybody? Okay, so if there are no more
Where is this document is parked?
Sorry.
Where is this document is?
Yeah, so this document I will be uploading in the source code. Okay, Solve with Instructor source code, week 5 open session I'll be uploading.
Oh, okay, thank you.
All right, so what do you get along with this? So you get the script.js, index.html, resource.txt, so that you know what endpoints are used, and this document. Okay, so this PDF you'll get. This entire thing will be added to Solve with Instructor source code for week 5.
Excuse me, sir. The source code is not accessible. Can you please give us access?
Source code is not accessible, meaning?
Under the supplementary contents, I'm not able to open it. It's saying request access.
Are you trying with your student ID?
Yes, sir. I'm on the portal only.
Can you show? Can you share your screen and show me that? So I'll put this error back to. Okay, so for the rest of you, if you have no queries, you can drop off. So we're done with the session, done with the content today. I'll just put it forward. Okay. Click on download.
1 second, sir. I didn't share that screen. 1 second.
It's okay, but it's visible to me.
So when I click the download, it's opening another screen, and I didn't share that
okay.
whole screen.
Yeah, so do you see you are signed in as?
Yes, I'm so sorry.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, so you change this to your student ID, you'll be accepted.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Okay, all right. So we'll close it here. I hope this was clear. Entire documentation will be added to source code. Okay. All right. Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll close it here.